Welcome to South Asian Environment Dialogue. Those of you who see this program, we have been doing it for last about 9 months, and we've been discussing a range of issues on environment and climate change. And as we all know, that Glasgow COP26 is around the corner. Maybe about 3 weeks' time from now, Glasgow is going to start. So this is the time we should discuss how Glasgow is going to unfold. What is going to happen in Glasgow? In all likelihood, we really don't know. I have covered about 10 COPs, and every time I get surprised myself as the things turn out. So, but still we'll try to figure out, and we have a brilliant panel to do that. But before that, I must say that this program is brought on by the Climate TV channel Canada, along with the Plurals India and the No TV Bangla, Bangladeshi television, basically YouTube channel, which is having more than 80,000 subscribers. But as I said, that it's a very interesting COP. You all know, in the backdrop of pandemic, last year we didn't have the COP. And with the pandemic still being kind of going through, everybody keeping the finger crossed how the climate change issue will be dealt at the global level. Then the US presidency got changed. The net zero issue came up. And now the whole Glasgow summit has taken a different turn. We are all expecting something positive to come out from Glasgow, but will the positive come out? That's the big question. So we will try to discuss all the issues relating to the next COP. And I have a fantastic panel to discuss that with me. I have with me Manjit Dhakal from Nepal. He's the head of LDC, the least developed countries support team at the Climate Analytics Nepal. So welcome, Manjit, to the show. It's great to have you in the show.
Thank you, Jayanta. Yeah, pleased to join you all.
Absolutely. I have with me Ulka Kelkar. Ulka is the Director of Climate Issues in World Resources Institute, WRI, India. Ulka, it's always great to have you. You are a fabulous panelist. Welcome, Ulka.
Thank you so much, Jayanta. So nice to be here again.
Absolutely great. I have with me Kavindu Ediweera. This is the first time I am hosting Kavindu. Kavindu recently was a delegate in the Youth for Climate pre-COP, and I'm sure that he has a lot to share from the youth perspective. Youth has become a major issue in the climate negotiation in the civil society movement. So it's great. It will be definitely great to hear you, Kavindu. Kavindu, welcome to the show.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. I have with me Kashmala, Kakakhel, a climate finance expert from Pakistan. And Kashmala is not only a climate finance expert, but also has been I would say, a senior pro in the climate negotiation. I think she has covered, if I'm not wrong, more than 10 COPs. So Kashmala, I think, a lot to offer from Pakistan's perspective. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jayanta. It's a pleasure.
Absolute privilege. I have with me Shamsuddoha, a very eminent climate expert from Bangladesh, having wide coverage on climate issues. Doha Saab, again, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Jayanta. I'm pleased to be here with you.
Great. So that's the panel we have. I hope I'm not missing because I'm too many across South Asia. So I think it's great to have the panel of South Asia to discuss these agendas. Let's start with Ulka, if I can. Ulka, we'll be definitely discussing the major issues. But my experience I have been covering COP since Copenhagen, almost regularly. And I found that in each COP, suddenly an issue from nowhere comes up and kind of shadows everything else under the sun. So do you feel something like that will happen here? What do you feel will be the key agenda to come up during the Glasgow talks? Ulka.
Thank you, Jayanta. I think your intuition is spot on. We are headed to this COP26 1 year late to finalize the Paris rule book, to close and conclude many years of negotiations on Article 6, on the details of reporting and transparency and common timeframes and many nitty-gritty issues like this. But you're right, there could be a surprise in store for us. I think the UK COP presidency has been very aggressive in visiting every country and in raising this whole specter of net zero targets. So I don't know to what extent that will dominate the conversation, but we can certainly expect it to play a major part. I would say that we could also expect a lot of discussion specifically around nature-based solutions and some kind of focus on that from all the leaders. And I think definitely the youth will play a very important part. We have all, for the last 2 years or more, have been spellbound by Fridays for the Future, Greta Thunberg, all these campaigns. And I think for all you know, they may be planning something to surprise all of us. So it certainly looks to be an exciting COP, even though it was intended to be a very operational one.
Absolutely. I think absolutely extremely exciting. Doha Saab, let's start with this, that what is that surprise element you expect Glasgow to offer, if anything in particular?
Thank you very much. And yes, we have expectation, long-awaited expectation from Glasgow. But I am not that hopeful because the Glasgow COP will entirely depend on the national commitments. And Glasgow COP is about to finalize the Paris rulebook. And if I consider the Paris Agreement, this is all about mitigation, obligations for emission reduction. So mitigation becoming priority concern from the developed countries and also from some developing countries. But there are other elements also under the Paris Agreement. There are loss and damage, finances for loss and damage, and also fulfilling 100 billion commitment of climate change finance. So these are the concerns from the developing countries. So if there is no harmonized negotiation among three elements like emission reduction and its alignment to the 1.5 degree centigrade goal, and also commitment for loss and damage finance, and for fulfilling commitment for 100 billion climate finance, then I think negotiation will not be progressed that much.
Extremely interesting point you raised on the outset, and I would like to bring on. Yes, I think you mentioned a very interesting thing: the linkage about within the issues, without taking the issues standalone. The need to have the linkage, very important. But you have also mentioned about the finance part of it, and that to me is the core. If you don't give money, nothing will prosper. So, Kashmala, what do you feel? Finance is the area. So, what do you feel, Kashmala, for where the money will come?
Absolutely. I think this is something that I keep talking about. There are fads and people will talk about the fact that we need to move towards a net zero world by 2050 because that's what the science is pointing towards. All of that is very great. But all these commitments that developing countries, because they're all under one radar, everybody has to develop NDCs, conditional, non-conditional. We can talk about that. But the bottom line is all of this costs money. Ambition costs even more money.
Yes.
So given the fact that when we signed the Paris Agreement in 2015, 2020 was supposed to be a moment when it became operational. So we had this 5-year window to have all those operational conversations happen. Yes, we had a bit of some of the stuff that we hadn't tied back in Spain. It sort of, we continued, as Ulka said, this was supposed to be an operational COP, absolutely. But then so many things have happened outside the COP that suddenly the surprise or the element that suddenly the whole world has started watching this COP with a much greater interest has been a bunch of things that have, like I said, that have happened outside the COP. And that has zeroed in more on the fact that if we don't talk about money when it comes to raising ambition, we're only just fooling each other. If I put it that way, we can set up beautiful targets and we can have very good timeline. We can talk about ambitious targets for 2030, 2050, all of that is great. But if you're not cognizant of the fact that things have changed dramatically since when we signed the Paris Agreement 6 years ago, we won't be in a position to actually make much of the excitement that the UK and others are trying to create around this COP with raising ambition and sort of making sure everybody submits their new NDCs, which have greater more people committing to doing much more than they planned to do back in Paris. But from a South Asian perspective, for me, the COP is all about ensuring that, and we'll discuss further as we go on into this conversation about what we pledged back then, what developed countries pledged back then, and now that we're going into this COP and when we're talking about the money, how the conversation now needs to change because there were a bunch of loopholes when we decided on, say, the 100 billion target, how it's supposed to be distributed, how are we going to calculate it? So there were a lot of issues that we never resolved back then. Exactly. Here is another opportunity at COP26 So if you want to talk about raising ambitions, let's also talk about matching, not just the amount of money, but also in terms of what the money is for, how we will spend it, and making sure it's in line with the needs of the countries to which we need to associate this money. So lots of interesting stuff coming out of finance this COP.
Absolutely. Manjit, that what Kashmala has just pointed out, that money is the key thing. You can keep on talking about the ambition raise, you can keep on the target, net zero target or 1.5 degree, whatever. But end of the day, you need money to operationalize whatever you are talking about. So, and the money is most required for the least developed countries because they are the most vulnerable group. So how do you feel the things will roll out in Glasgow, according to you?
Yep, thank you, Jayanta. Let me start with the context. The context that we are in now, and the discussion we had earlier in terms of the expectation. Yes, this COP is more because there is less to do at the COP, because the call for the country to submit NDC was made earlier. It's a country's responsibility to do that. The call for a developed country to mobilize finance is a decision that was made in Copenhagen or Cancun, maybe 10 or 12 years earlier. So the decisions are already there. It's all about implementing them. So there is less that we can expect a big decision to happen at this COP. This is not something like Copenhagen or the Paris in 2015. But I would answer in a different way. The surprise that we can get. We expect surprise because it's not only the surprise from the presidency, but if we keep on putting ourselves on this procedural process on the mandate, I think that will not be able to respond what science has called for. The emissions that the countries have presented are not enough. The IPCC called for emission to be reduced by 45%, and the emissions will be heading about 16% by 2030. The youth mobilization, the expectation that we have heard around, the impacts that we have seen around the world, not only in the poor, the vulnerable countries, but also in many advanced economies around the world. And I think on top of all this, what I have also heard is the participation from, or the accreditation from around the world is going to be highest compared to any of the COP as of now. I think that's also one of the biggest expectations. Everybody is expecting this COP will set some milestone for the world to put on a track of 1.5 degree, a finance commitment that was made a long ago to be realized, and address, make some concrete decision on loss and damage. Because if we follow only the mandate on loss and damage, then it will just be to make operational one institution that was established a couple of years earlier called Santiago Network. What I believe is that even the Santiago Network will be full operational, that will not be helpful to address the extreme events that are happening in Bangladesh or in mountains in Nepal. So we need, I think, something beyond this mandate to address the reality in the ground. So that's what I feel.
I think addressing the reality is a big, I think, task, because our experience from the last few COPs is that after a prolonged deliberation, maybe extension of 36 hours, 48 hours, more than that, finally, everybody agreed to disagree and shift the onus to the next COP. That was the precedence, and that was the kind of narrative we were used to the last few COPs. After 36 hours, 48 hours, a diluted agreement and the decision to be shifted to the next COP. So I think that no more can happen. We have to take a call in Glasgow, because already 2020 was supposed to be the year of implementation. We are already a year being pushed back due to this pandemic. So we really cannot really push back any further. I'll come to that, but before, the youth issue has been repeatedly raised, and we have Kavindu with us from Sri Lanka. Kavindu, you were part of the pre-COP youth kind of dialogue. How the youth, because after the Greta Thunberg phenomena, I would take a phenomena, after the Greta Thunberg phenomena erupted on the global climate negotiation, and I still remember how she completely mesmerized the Madrid talks when she came there and kind of went through it. So, but all this kind of COVID pushed back the entire civil society movement, also the youth movement. So how you plan to regain the kind of lost way?
That was the Youth for Climate event. The experience is very a new experience after, after about 2 years time, even the youth, overall the youth also got the time to meet in person and then talk about the issues. And there were in the overall the event, we were focusing on main 4 thematic areas. They are sort of thematic areas. So one is youth driving ambition, and then one topic is on sustainable recovery, and one thematic area was non-state actors and climate conscious society. So all the youth, there were about 400 youth from around the world, 186 countries. We had a zero draft that they prepared based on the inputs that these youth, everybody had commented on. So we sort of worked on those zero drafts to be submitted to the leaders who came for the pre-COP summit, and then and also at the final plenary, Mr. Alok Sharma, the president of COP26. Made sort of pledge that he's going to take all the documents, all the drafts that we prepared on the Youth and Parliament Day of the COP26. They're going to take up and then build on it. So overall, if I may quote Prime Minister Boris Johnson at the final plenary, so he mentioned that this COP26 all about their main focus is coal, cars, cash, and trees. That's what, in a summary, what he said was it's on those 4 words, it has a lot of content on it. He said in summary, it's about coal, cars, cash, and trees. So in my opinion,
Kavindu, sorry to interrupt you. It sounds good. I think these politicians do have a fabulous vocabulary, but at the end of the day, what you get on ground, that's very important. I have heard, Kavindu, so many wonderful lectures over the last decade. Every time I get kind of really geared up hearing those politicians. But as a journalist, I know nothing is going to happen end of the day. So are you really satisfied only with the words, Kavindu?
Not really, but I am someone who sort of believe so the politicians and the rulers, the rule makers and the policy makers, in this drive, we are on the same track. It can be politicians, policy makers, or the civil society, or the youth. We are on the one track that we are working towards this common goal. But in this, let's say we are in a bus. Maybe the policymakers are the drivers of this thing. We may be the passengers. Sure. If they are not abide by the common ethical path that they are taking, as passengers, we sort of need to have sort of a collaborative attempt to make them go.
Kavindu, I'm not pushing you. I'll come back with you this question. In Madrid, we have all seen how this millions of people with Greta Thunberg leading the show completely have a kind of impact on the COP. But I am just a bit worried about this whole impact being translated into real action. I'll come back to you on that. But let's go back to Ulka. Ulka, let's discuss a bit on this IPCC report and the finance part of it together. This IPCC report, Ulka, is very clearly mentioned, I think very in clear terms, the kind of risks those are in front of us. And it's also already, I think all of you have agreed that finance is the key issue. Kashmala was also saying that. I think Manjit would also like to add on to that. But Ulka, let's for the while talk about the finance. Let's get the nitty-gritty part of it. That we have been hearing these things, GCF, GF, and other things. What's your take on, Ulka? How you feel that whole issue of finance will roll out in Glasgow?
Well, I think there is a growing disappointment, resentment, almost frustration that is building. Sure. Particularly, a lot was expected of the new Biden administration when they won, and they did announce very recently that they were doubling their climate finance contribution to now what is $11 billion per year. But if you look at the fair share of the US, and there are many ways to calculate this, a recent WRI report says that at least $20 billion per year is the fair share of the United States. There are other reports that go even higher, $40 billion or so. So compared to the size of its economy, it's only contributing 0.03% of its gross national income. There are other countries like France, Germany, and Japan, which are giving 0.25% of their gross national income. It's the best so far. But if you look at that, most of it is loans. And the effect that it has is that the most vulnerable countries are becoming more indebted. First, because of the rebuilding effort due to climate disasters that have struck them. Sure. And now because of this climate finance that is coming in the form of loans. Adaptation is only 25% of the total climate finance, whereas it should be about 50-50 at least. I think only UK is one of the few countries that is aiming for that ratio. And finally, the reporting on climate finance really needs to go up. So I think when the COP attempts to finalize the Paris Rule Book, especially around the enhanced transparency framework, that applies just as much to finance reporting as it does to mitigation reporting. So I think with all of these things, the track record has been poor, yes. But there is growing awareness that we really need to step up this game. And as everyone, all the other panelists have said before, and you have also emphasized, it is a symbol of trust, of solidarity. The $100 billion number is not going to solve all the adaptation problems of our world, but it is symbolic. If we can't do this much, then how can we expect others to do?
Absolutely. I think Manjit, what just Ulka has said, that $100 billion is something which is promised long back. It's not new. I think it's been promised way back in Copenhagen and then reiterated in Cancun. So if we cannot fulfill what we promised about a decade back or more than a decade back, how can really we live up to the expectation? So Manjit, what's your take on that? Do we really expect the money to come up in substantial terms? What is required for the world to survive, Manjit? Especially the South Asian and other vulnerable countries?
Sure. So we recently see this OECD report, which kind of confirmed that around 80 billion has been mobilized. But as Ulka said, that also covers a huge part of loan, and in the process, we still haven't agreed. We don't have an agreed definition on climate finance. So it's also difficult to say that what is that 80 billion all about, what is constitute, and so on. And that's not the report prepared in the process. So it's an OECD report. But even if we believe that report, then we are not on track. And the 100 billion that was agreed earlier is a political number. So which will be a benchmark up to 2025. One of the mandate for COP26 is also to decide, start the process for the 2025, post-2025 climate finance, which we have called that it should be based on the needs of developing country, not a political number, but it should be based on the needs of a developing country. It should be based on science, so that it's able to respond to the 1.5 degree compatible world, the impact that the world is facing. Having said this, in LDC's country, what I have also seen is most of the LDCs, they don't put conditions when they present their target. If we see recently the Climate Action Tracker report, the Gambia is one among the countries that were analyzed on the top list, which is compatible to 1.5 degree. There are a number of other countries, including Nepal, where I come from, as a 2 degree compatible. Why we do so? Because if we refer to one of our original report by ICIMOD, if the global temperature is maintained to 1.5 degree in a very positive scenario, 1/3 of the ice in the Hindu Kush Himalaya will melt. That means if the emission is not reduced within this decade, I'm not talking about the net zero by 2050, which is a long way. If we cannot reduce the emission by within this decade, it's difficult. One plus billion population in upstream, downstream will be impacted. So that's the reason it's what we have called is the major emitter particularly, and the if we refer to, for example, the G20 report recently released by WRI and Climate Analytics, if all G20 takes an ambitious targets, we will be on a track of 1.7 degree. So that's how we see the adaptation, because if the emission keeps on rising, we will not be able to.
I think Manjit, the very important point you raised, that as of now, the various statements are being made, but still I think the money is much short than what we require. So I think let's kind of let's bring on Kashmala into the discussion into it. And Kashmala, what Manjit was just referring to, that he was referring to various reports and all that, but the money is key, as we are all been talking about. So according to, you have been following this money agenda for a long time. What do you feel, Kashmala, is going to happen? Are they going to kind of release in tidbits, or you really feel there'll be a game changer kind of issue or financial part coming up in Glasgow?
Thank you. So let's just blow this up a little more, and let's look at what happened when the pandemic hit the globe. $11 trillion were pumped into the economies of the developed countries. 11 trillion. Let's compare that to the 100 billion for a second. 100 billion we're talking about since about 10 years now. We're all talking about it. We've been talking about. Within a year, again, I would like to reiterate, $11 trillion were injected into the economies of these developed countries to sort of support their to support the situation that had been caused by the pandemic. 16 out of the 20 G20 countries who injected this money into their system, 16 out of 20 will actually have a negative impact on the environment. So while we talk about building back better and we talk about green recovery, it sounds very nice. It sounds very good when we're being told that things will, now is the time to change and all of that. This is a good opportunity. The pandemic is a great opportunity, but we've actually seen that the opportunity hasn't really been seized by at least the G20 countries. One, when it actually comes to showing action, we haven't seen them take the action that they're supposed to. Number two, we have seen the sort of money that was required to actually deal with a problem that seemed so eminent and so important. And suddenly climate change, I guess, isn't as important, and it's still not a crisis in there in generally the sort of perspective we have, or the sort of calculation that we do, the political calculations that we do. Maybe climate change isn't as important. If we're still talking about $100 billion when we can inject $11 trillion into our economy within a span of 1 year. So given that these things make you realize the reality on ground, going into this COP, and Manjit already explained, we need to learn as South Asia. When we enter into these conversations, we need to sort of learn from our mistakes in the past. In 2009, when they said we have a number, which is 100 billion, yes, okay, fine, progress has been made, at least there is a number that we are talking about. We didn't know where the money is coming from, whether it's the private sector, the public sector. We didn't know what financial instruments they would use, whether loan, grants, etc. We didn't know whether actually the requirement was 100 billion. What if it was 100 trillion? We don't know, right? But because we started negotiating, all these questions started because we hadn't, as Manjit said, we hadn't defined climate finance. Everything and anything was being added. And Ulka has mentioned a couple of reports as well. We can compare the very obvious one. The OECD says that as of 2018, it's been the public finance has been 59, say 60 billion, whereas the Oxfam report says it's actually been anywhere between 19 to 22 billion. So learning from, rather than getting bogged down with negotiating on numbers because we don't know what we are calculating, this COP actually gives us an opportunity to to mark these things down as clearly as we can, because from finance perspective, sorry, I'm going a little technical, but maybe it's important. At COP26, there will be two financial conversations. One, how do we because we said 100 billion annually from 2020 to 2025. So one conversation on finance will be for these 5 years. How is the 100 billion being actually spent over the period of these 5 years? And then the second conversation is post. Should it be 100 billion? Should it be an iterative number? Should it be one? Should it be? So all that conversation needs to, and again, we should learn from our mistakes when we actually agree to the 100 billion and sort of learn from it and say, look, going forward, given that the situation has now moved from a climate change to a climate crisis, let's be more intelligent about how we negotiate.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'll come back to that because I'll be asking all of you questions before I go to Doha Saab, because there's a kind of opinion going around that now the COP discussion should be linked with the other linked UN conversation. For example, IMF may be brought into the discussion. Unless you brought those financial institutions, the global financial institutions, the money issue cannot be resolved. But before that, I've been consciously coming to Doha Saab now, because Doha Saab, you've heard what we've been talking about. Bangladesh is leading the vulnerability forum. And what do you feel, Doha Saab, is going to happen? Because these are the more vulnerable countries, these are more impacted countries which Bangladesh leads at this point of time. Doha Saab.
Okay, thank you very much. And before that, I would like to put some issues on climate finance also.
Sure.
I mean, just
absolutely.
1 or 2 minutes.
Absolutely.
When we talk about climate finance, that the question came first, this is quality of finance. So if we consider the quality of finance, then finance is available. I mean, if we consider climate change finance, climate change investment, then there are many multilateral development banks like IMF, World Bank, ADB, even the Asian Infrastructure Bank. They are
there seems to be some bit of a technical issue with Doha Saab. Doha Saab, I think your link is. I'm coming back to you, but let very quickly before Doha Saab's connection gets restored, very quickly to Kavindu. Kavindu,
in a sense, this is look into resilience activities.
No, your line got struck a bit between. Please repeat what you said because we couldn't hear you. Your line got impacted.
No, it's okay now.
No, it's okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Absolutely fine.
Okay. What I'm trying to discuss is the source of finance. If we consider the multilateral banks, they're coming up with more finances, particularly World Bank, ADB, IMF, and also Asian Infrastructure Bank. There is another bank, New Development Bank. So countries are coming up with new investment, and they are targeting climate change, climate resilient development for more investment. I mean, developed country is creating different avenue for investing their money in terms of climate resilient development. And they're bypassing the existing financing modalities under the UNFCCC. So I think it would be a major concern from the climate vulnerable countries and also other developing countries, whether we should take loans or we should appeal for more grants for climate change resilience. Yes. The other concern is that when you talk about climate vulnerable countries, you know that it's a country of 48 climate vulnerable countries. And there is also a small group of the finance ministers of those countries. And there was a global meeting few months ago. The finance ministers of the climate vulnerable countries, met together, and that event was financed by some multilateral development banks. So the notion is that the climate vulnerable countries need more finances, and the multilateral banks are ready to finance resilience building in the climate vulnerable countries. So this is one context. The other context is that if we consider the recent communication of the climate vulnerable countries, they are trying to communicate three major issues. One is how to decarbonize the economy. And as a leader, government of Bangladesh already developed a long-term vision, long-term plan. It's called Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. And that plan, include huge targets of power generation from the renewable sources, and also took a, roadmap for, phasing out from the dirty fuels like coals. But again, the investment is huge. So our concern is that whether the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan and also other plan is creating opportunity for the multilateral banks to invest more in those countries in the name of climate resilient or carbon neutral economy. The other concern is to asking for more finance for adaptation, and again, fulfilling 100 billion commitment from the developed countries would be a major demand from the climate fund.
What about loss and damage? What about
and also loss and damage, finances for loss and damage, because those countries are suffering from loss and damages from the climate change impact. So it will be a major demand from those countries to have more finances for adjustment.
So broadly, these will be the demands to be raised in Glasgow from the vulnerable countries.
This demand already have raised by different communications
but do you expect the demands to be met in at least to a certain percentage in Glasgow? What's your take on that? What's your
right. This will be communicated in Glasgow, but the problem is that the country group is not mandated to participate in the negotiation because they are not group accredited by the UNFCCC, but still they have.
But they are various groups. They are part of various groups. But they are part of various other groups. So they can always raise those issues in those groups.
Right.
Absolutely.
And they can potentially influence the other groups.
Absolutely. We are kind of running out of our time for the first episode, but very quickly, Kavindu, very quickly, from the youth perspective, the agendas you were talking about, how important is finance? Very quickly.
I didn't get the last part, sorry, coming in.
I'm asking you that from the, you mentioned about the issues that youths are raising.
Yes.
Where does finance in that list? How important is finance issue in the whole demand being set by the youth groups around the world?
Oh, it's overall the finance, the topic finance. We spoke about a lot in each and every thematic sort of groups. Even the youths at the final plenary, they were sort of complaining about these pledges that developing sort of Annex 1 countries are making, while I think Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Mr. Alok Sharma, they were mentioning that so these countries have committed. Even the President Biden has doubled up the amount that he pledged. But youth were very sort of concerned about this thing, about this particular number that they have committed.
Okay.
Before.
So youth concern is quite there for the finance as well.
Yes, very much.
Enough. Before I wind up this particular episode, going to the next episode, Ulka, starting with you, very quick answer I require. There is a talk about market being brought into the climate finance. We have seen earlier how the carbon market kind of flopped, but now this new market mechanism kind of came up as part of the discussion in Paris and being subsequently taken forward. How serious is this, and how, as a climate expert, somebody who's working on finance, I'll be asking the same question to all of you. Very quickly respond within 30 seconds, everybody, that how important that new market mechanism?
As an economist, I am always in favor of market-based mechanisms. I feel that they lead to more efficient and cost-effective emission reductions. But the important thing is to avoid double counting. So the integrity of any market-based mechanisms has to be there.
But do you feel this market mechanism can work? Because we have seen the carbon market flop earlier.
Well, the difference is that a lot of the other carbon markets, for example, the EU emissions trading system and now the new Chinese market, are coming into their own. And so the global prices are rising. So the larger market conditions are leading to a higher price for carbon. That will play a difference compared to the Syrian era.
Okay, great. Kashmala.
On the paper, it sounds really good, but I'm not convinced, especially when the EU and the Green Deal starts talking about the carbon border tax, which is going to have an impact on my trading from a South Asia perspective. So I'm very, very skeptical in terms of how we go forward on these things.
Okay, Manjit.
Yeah, very briefly, the market that we had in the Kyoto Protocol and the market in the Paris Agreement are different. But this is not only about the offsetting, it is to raise ambition. We have countries in South Asia who call for the units to be transferred from Kyoto to the Paris Agreement, which is not helpful. So there are divergent views within the region. In terms of the finance from the market, yes, it is helpful in one sense. It will bring a predictable finance for a long term. But what we have been calling for a long time is we need public finance, which is easily accessible to our countries.
So this market-driven mechanism cannot replace the demand for public finance. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, we can say
public finance has to be the key.
Yeah.
Public finance has to be the key.
Yep.
Done. Doha, sir.
Yes, thank you. In fact, market become an essential element of Paris Agreement. I mean, like Kyoto Protocol. But I think that we should not rely mostly on market, because we need to control market. And I think we should also introduce a quota at what amount of emission reduction should be dealt by market, and what amount of emission should be dealt by the national economies or national countries. So my concern is that we should not surrender everything to the market.
Okay, great. Kavindu, anything to add on that?
Even from the youth perspective, sort of this cap and trade and this offsetting thing, sort of youth sort of believe that they are sort of over sort of obsolete concepts that at the moment. But so we have run out of time to sort of trade the thing, but they are under impression that that the polluters need to commit.
Do you support the market? Target. Do you support the market-based climate finance, or you don't support it? What's the stand of the category?
The next one countries, they need to commit. I mean, even the companies.
So public finance.
Yes.
Great. I think we had a wonderful about 40 minutes discussion way back, I think in Cancun. Jairam Ramesh Dadan, Environment Minister of India, said in a very interesting way that that people are talking about the fast track finance, but they are neither fast nor on track. So I think the same narrative has been going on over the last decade. We have been talking about the finance. We have been talking about various jargons. We are talking about the old market, carbon market. We are talking about the new carbon market. We have been seeing the fight between the imaginary old market versus the imaginary new market. So, a lot of games being played around, but actual money is not there. So I hope that this Glasgow with the IPCC report underlining the imminency of the impact, underlining the threat that the world is going to counter. For a change, the politicians will kind of recognize that and will put money, at least to a certain extent, which is required at least by the developing countries, the least developed countries, for the adaptation and the other mitigation, and particularly loss and damage measures. So with that, we come to the end of this episode, but we'll be coming soon with another episode on this. I'm starting the new episode.
Take two.
Take two. So
how will this take? The new episode?
This part will be about the geopolitics and other